So something you all may not know about me is that I love pirates. Throughout my years growing up, I was exposed to a lot of pirate media that romanticized a pirate's life. Hell, I grew up watching the Pirates of the Caribbean movies in theaters and especially on DVD. One of my favorite animes of all time, and one of the first I ever watched, was the anime series of Black Lagoon, which of course covers modern day piracy. And of course, one of my favorite games is Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. However, the one thing all those series had in common is that they very much romanticized the ideas of piracy, the ideas of freedom, and just enjoying these rum-loving scalawags. However, this, Charleston and the Golden Age of Piracy, by Christopher Byrd Downey, really highlights the actual reality of what is known as the Golden Age of Piracy, especially concerning around the city of Charleston, South Carolina. And honestly, I actually received this book as a gift years ago, and it was not until a few months back that I finally was able to dive into this book, and this will actually be my first non-fiction book review. But after reading this, it definitely sheds some light on the Golden Age of Piracy and some of the ever-famous characters there. So today, let's get into some of the details about this book. So coming around at a good 119 pages, despite being so short, this book definitely highlights a lot of details and gives some very good imagery of some of the most famous pirates who grew up during this time and were generally well-known crooks all the way across Charleston, South Carolina, but even across the Caribbean Sea. So while this book was brief, it does give a very nice overview of the entire period of the Golden Age of Piracy. But I'll tell you right now, what really stuck out to me was some of the ever-famous characters here. Not just the history, but especially some of the main characters and crooks who popped out throughout history. Some of which are well known, others not so much. So, let's talk about some of the four that really stuck out to me. So first up, we have the ever-famous Edward Teach, aka the infamous pirate Blackbeard. So, when I first heard that Blackbeard himself was going to be involved in this history, I mean, come on. He is well known throughout both popular culture and in history. But reading about Blackbeard's life actually was pretty interesting. How he started off as a privateer, how he became a most infamous pirate, hell. In this book, it actually covers how he held the whole city of Charleston hostage for medicine and supplies because so many of his crew were actually ridden with scurvy. For those of you who don't know, scurvy is like a rotting of the gums where your teeth begin to fall out of your head due to a lack of vitamin C. Honestly though, Blackbeard himself, I like how he is so overhyped in popular fiction, and yet in reality he was a very well-known pirate. And honestly, reading his history was fascinating. But again, I will say this first of all, Blackbeard himself went out like an absolute badass. So at one point, he was given the opportunity to join a pirate armada after taking the king's pardon and becoming a privateer. But he chose to return to the pirate life. But he rejects these other pirates and joining their armada and chooses to strike out on his own. But how does he go down? He goes down in the middle of a fight, taking multiple pistol shots, sword wounds, and just not dying from any of this despite all the severe blood loss that must have been occurring at that point. And the only way that he dies finally is when a sword is stabbed through his neck and then he is full-on decapitated. By the end of it, the autopsy for Blackbeard himself was that he had a total of 6 pistol shots in his body, multiple sword cuts, and of course he was missing his head. Blackbeard himself did not go down easily. This guy walked around like a living tank and earned his title as a legend. So seeing the man behind all the myths and the hype of Blackbeard really highlights that fact that this pirate has definitely earned his claim to fame, and why he is such a hallmark, why he is such a massive figure for the Golden Age of Piracy in general, and why he is such an icon even to this day. But besides Blackbeard, there were a few other lesser known pirates throughout history. So let's get on to the next two, shall we? Next up we have Anne Bonny and Kalako Jack Rockham. Now normally I would not mention Jack Rockham here because he's not that well known of a pirate, but I will mention him due to his association with Anne Bonny, who is a very well known female pirate throughout history, but not only just her, but also Mary Read, whom was not shown in the book or given an image, so unfortunately I can't really give an idea of who she was. But as for Anne Bonny, she is very well known as someone who had served under Jack Rackham, not only as a crew member, but also as a lover. And it was actually because of Anne Bonny that Jack even returned to the life of a pirate in the first place. But here's what I find funny about their whole story. Now, they did go up and down, pillaging the seas for a while, taking out smaller ships, but at one point, they are cornered by a large British galley, or man of war. And the funniest thing is that while Jack himself was hiding with the rest of his crew below decks, Anne Bonny and Mary Read were waiting on top of deck to confront the British soldiers and did not go down without a fight. And the funny thing is, all three of them were arrested, but while Jack was willing to accept his fate and was hung in Charleston, Anne Bonny and Mary Read, they both pleaded their bellies, which is a common phrase that was used to say, "We are pregnant." So they were held in prison until their pregnancy, and whilst Mary Read tragically died and miscarried the child, Anne Bonny herself has actually gone missing, as far as this book is telling me, that her story remains unfinished or unknown, because nobody knows what has happened to Anne Bonny, even now, to this day. But I find it most fascinating that there were actually well-known female pirates. And she wasn't just a lover of a well-known pirate captain or very little known. She was a straight-up badass, and I love it. But finally, the fourth character that really stuck out to me in this whole history was in fact the gentleman pirate Stede Bonnet. Now to be fair, I didn't know much about this character or this man at first. I didn't even know anything. Like, literally, Blackbeard is such an icon through the Golden Age of Piracy that you don't really think about what other famous pirates there were. But Stede Bonnet really stuck out to me due to his whole moniker of the gentleman pirate. To be fair, from what I saw throughout his history, every time he popped up in this book, it felt like he was trying to be a good captain, but at the same time, he did not have the fierceness or the bloodthirstiness of other pirate captains. He chose to be more diplomatic with his resources. Now, there were times he would be able to be a pirate, but most of the time, he was more of a negotiator than he was a fighter, which unfortunately did not make him popular with his crew members or anyone he either served under, or served with, or anyone he commanded. But in the end, despite the fact that he was captured, a lot of people actually pleaded for him to be let go. Like, the whole city of Charleston was practically on Stede's side at one point to just let the man go. Even when they put him on trial, in the end, they did pronounce him and his crew guilty. But I feel like Stede Bonnet is definitely one of the more well-remembered ones, especially in Charleston's history, considering the fact that he even has a memorial stone marking that place in history when he and 29 of his men were essentially tried and executed, and I think it still remains there to this day even. So Stede, while not a very well-known pirate, definitely has made his mark in history, even now. And I honestly love that moniker of his, the gentleman pirate. It just sounds so distinctly British, especially when you realize that this is during the time still of the American British colonies. And that's about all the only pirates I can think of. Charles Vane also stuck out as a very ferocious pirate, but he just didn't have as much interest in me as these four here. But let's go into the overall score, shall we? With all said and done, I will give Charleston and the Golden Age of Piracy a solid 8 out of 10. It was informative, it kept things brief, it provided a good overall history brief of the Golden Age of Piracy itself. It introduced some fascinating characters that I had never known, or even some that I did know, but it gave them more context. All in all, this just actually increased my love of pirates, whether it be romanticism or reality. I'll always have a soft spot in my heart for these rum-loving scallywags. And if you guys want me to review more nonfiction books in the future, please let me know in the comment section down below. This was actually my first nonfiction book review, and if this one does well, I might review more of those in the future. Feel free to let me know. And if you guys have any other book recommendations, also feel free to let me know in the comment section down below. Share this with your friends or any other pirate fans that you know. Anyways, thank you all once again for listening to this crazy man's ramblings. I hope you liked this video. And honestly, just thank you again. This is Rambling Collector, signing off. Have an awesome day.